Good morning, everyone. How are you today? It's a bit grey here, but I've got a wonderful view of some really orange leaves. So it's really autumnal, and I can see horses in the field. So it's a really beautiful day out there. So I was going to have Jenny with me today, but she's got her, she's been doing an EFT, like the tapping course, and the additional part of her tapping is today. So she obviously she can't be here today, so that's not a problem. So you've just got me, which will be fun for you, but that's nice, that's okay. So what I was going to talk about was the different archetypes of the goddess. Now, traditionally, which we looked at the beginning of the week, is Maiden, Mother and Crone. And so we're going to look at those. We're going to see some other people join us. I'm just going to waffle on for a bit because that's what I do. But oh, my husband's watching from his bed. Good morning, husband, watching from bed. So yeah, traditionally, as we know, it's the Maiden, Mother and Crone, and that's the triple aspect goddess. And that's sort of one that has been, people think that's been current, or it's been in existence since humankind began donkeys years ago, hundreds of, tens of thousands of years ago, longer than that. So those sort of traditional types, you've got your triple goddesses. You've got like Persephone, Demeter and Hecate. Brigid in the Celtic tradition, she was all three. And Diana in the, she's Roman, isn't she? Diana's Roman, yeah. She was a huntress, goddess of the moon and goddess of the underworld. So all three things come in of her. I'm just putting this up on my Facebook so I can see if there's comments, so that I can, here we are, so that I can respond, because I'm doing it on my phone because it's easier. I'm a little bit delayed, but that's okay. So yeah, so there you go. So feel free to comment. It is only me, but if you want to add anything or join in, please do. So what we've been looking at this week is the fact that over the last definitely sort of 50 years, a lot more has been reimagined, rediscovered, re-identified, whatever term you want to use for it. So your maiden traditionally is your child, your young woman, and that, as we know, is a really usually playful and innocent energy. Quite often that's curiosity and exploring. And for me, that's the early part of the year. That's Imalka and Ostara. And then where you traditionally jump to the mother, as we've seen, there's the lover archetype, which comes in around Beltane. And that sometimes also is also the warrior. I'll come back to these in a bit and some of the reasons why. So that tends to be Beltane and Letha. Before we move to the mother archetypes, obviously the lover and the warrior is about love. It is about sexuality and fecundity, but it's also about love of self and love of others in a more platonic, protective way, which is where the warrior comes in. So obviously the mother is the Lammas mother, is a really common archetype. Persephone, Demeter being that mother, then the mother of the harvest. So that is Lammas and Mabon, or autumn equinox, depending on what people call it. So obviously there the creatrix slots in as well, for perhaps women who will not become mothers for whatever reason, women who don't have a womb or whose womb no longer works, or women who weren't born with a womb, women who have changed to women. And the creatrix and the creation thing can be of a life of art. It doesn't have to be purely of a child. So then it goes to the crone in sort of the late autumn for winter months. But here is where the biggest changes have occurred. So we've got the creatrix, who is creating things, but not from the womb. It can come from the root, which is all in the same place. And I think this is a huge change over the last 50 years, is identifying the queen, who is queen of, as lovely Joanna pointed out, queen of fucking everything, which I really liked. the wise woman, and also the crone later in life. So all those, I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 instead of the traditional 3. And of course, these have been reimagined over the last 50 years. And when you look back at the history behind it, it's not unsurprising that it's taken that length of time for these things to come to the forefront in the Neolithic and Bronze Age time. So we're talking of 12,000 years ago to 6,500 years ago, I think. Neolithic and Bronze Age is about 2,500 BC, something like that. You know, the average age of your mortality was 30. So for a woman grown up, the minute that a woman is sexually active in that sort of era, she is going to become a mother. Unless she's got some issues with herself, she is going to become a mother, because obviously there was no contraception apart from holding on or, you know, pulling away at the right moment. And I guess it took them a while to work that out. But your average age there is sort of late 20s, 30s. And obviously childbirth is going to be a huge, huge factor in women's mortality. I mean, these are average ages. So, you know, and even medieval times, I mean, it was brought down hugely by the plague. Excuse me. But even then, the average age is 40 was old. So if you got to be a grandmother, you're quite old. And I can see why that would be, you would be heading towards that crime stage. And of course, we're in a patriarchal society then. The church is saying this and we're all obeying. In the 1950s, the average world age went to 48. That's 1950. So that's not that long ago. And you think up till even prior to that, women were dying in childbirth quite regularly, which was hugely bringing down the mortality rate, hugely bringing down the opportunity for women to get to be older. So anybody who was older is the crown. I'm thinking of queens. Is the crown, and of course, you know what would the killer in childbirth is the rate of infection. And I was thinking about, I had a bath this morning, and I was thinking about this. And when I had Sophie, my daughter, I had ragged membranes. So there was the membranes, it was on my notes, but I didn't understand what it was. But that had all rolled up inside me and given me a wound infection that actually took 2 lots of antibiotics to sort out, and potentially scarred me a little bit inside. That's fine, you know. But had that been 100 years ago or 200 years ago, I was thinking about that would possibly would have killed me, depending on how well and healthy I was. I mean, I was 26 when I had Sophie, 23 when I had Dan. So, you know, I was fit and healthy. But even so, thinking about it like that, I thought, wow, if I'd been born 150 years ago, that may well have finished me off. My children may not have had a mother. So that's something to really be grateful for, obviously. And the other huge thing coming into the 60s and the 70s was contraception, which meant that there is a phase where, as you come out of maidenhood and you explore sexuality, you don't have to become that mother straight away. You don't have to become a mother at all if you don't want to. And obviously, with, you know, the rise of feminism in the 60s and 70s, which propelled all of this and moved all this forward, it really, really, you know, explains why there was such a burst of activity around rediscovering archetypes. So, and obviously today, that I think the average age is, I did look it up, the average age of the world today is 71. So that's across the world. So that means that there's going to be a lot of people that are a lot older than that. So we've got more time to think about the archetypes and where we want to be, who we identify as. And obviously, since the movement of the feminist movement, there is an awful lot of time and opportunity for people to rediscover what they've been thinking. So, I mean, it's as late as 1790 something that Mary Wollstonecraft wrote Vindication of the Rights of Women, and that's one of the seminal works on saying that, you know, we should have equality. That's Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. That's her mother. Been to their grave actually in Bournemouth. And then you've got the suffragette movement of the sort of Emmeline Pankhurst and Sylvia Pankhurst and Christabel Pankhurst, which was the WSPU, so it's the Women's Society Political Union, Social and Political Union, and I think that was founded early 1900s, which was obviously the violent, the more not violent, the more militant, side of things for gaining, female emancipation, the vote. So up till then, we were controlled by men, and up till then, our bodies are controlled. The autonomy of our bodies is not our own. And of course, there was the Millicent Fawcett, was the president of the National Union of Women's Society of Suffrage, again in the early 1900s, which was the less militant and the more, it wasn't militant at all actually, it was the much more measured approach to it. And interestingly, my great-grandmother, my mum, who was a very upstanding pillar of the community, my Ellen, she was a member of that. So she was very, very churchy, mum remembers as was strict. She was brought up in the Victorian era, but she was part of that group. So, it wasn't just all the I've got nothing against the Pankhursts, and they fought really hard and all the rest of it, but more genteel and more moderate women were also fighting for the vote that early on, and apparently my great grandmother had the blessings of my great grandfather as well, and which is quite forward thinking for that length of time ago. And then of course you've got World War One and World War Two, where women had to work. And all those factors for me, I mean, they just absolutely point to the rise of feminism in the 60s and the 70s. And women starting to say, hang on a minute, where's this, I'm a crone now that I've had these children, and, what do I want? Before, women's roles were to get married, have children, and be a housewife, in modern society, in Victorian and Edwardian society, they would have been busy working away in the factories or in service. But the minute in service you got married, you were out, and you certainly didn't have a baby when you were in service. And some of my family were in service at a local manor house mansion, huge hall over here. So the Glastonbury Goddess Temple evolved obviously in people's thinking in the 70s, I would imagine, but it actually has been present in Glastonbury since the 1980s. And on their website, it actually uses the terms re-experiencing and reimagining the goddess. And I think that is the key to these new archetypes that, we've been exploring this week and looking at. And it was interesting that a lot of people commented on, they were the queen, they were the sovereign, they were all these different things. They weren't. Women today aren't ready to go from a mother. I mean, my friend Naomi's watching, who you won't be a mum, I don't suppose, Naomi, will you? It's not your cup of tea. So but Naomi's also equally very, very creative. She's she is a creatrix, she's a lot younger than me. But as someone who's 49, I'm not ready to become a crone. And I think some of these terms here that we've got can switch backwards and forwards. This was something I was mulling over in the bath. I like a long bath on a Sunday because then I can mull over what I'm thinking about. But the maiden, you've got the innocence and the naivety, the curiosity. And then the lover, as you do become that teenager, you become aware of your feelings and what's going on in the world. The warrior also fits in there really, really well. I was talking to an old teacher of ours. He was a fantastic, absolutely brilliant teacher. We all absolutely adored him. He's very political and very much an activist, and he really fired up what was already going to happen in our teenage years for us, was to look at the world, to look at injustice. Naomi says, not in the slightest, but she's a cat mum. You've got your cats, haven't you, darling? But those teenage years, I mean, I was involved in you know, interested and involved in Amnesty International, Greenpeace, getting quite political, all those sorts of things where you are, it's a love because you care. And there was a quote, I couldn't find it this morning when I was looking, but there is a quote about a warrior being somebody who protects those they love. It's not always about fighting for the sake of fighting. And I know, Naomi, you're watching, I know your warrior aspect is protecting somebody you love right now, and doing everything in your power. And that's coming from a place of love, not fighting for someone to be well, but it's not coming from a place of hate or fighting or wanting war. So that warrior thing, although war comes from that, I think the warrior thing is a very protectorate thing. And that's something that for some people will go on longer. And now we can choose not to jump from lover to mother straight away. We can choose when we do become a mother. Yeah, warrior suits me better as I'm as protective of my friends. She is. Naomi is very, very protective. She's very, very loving in her warrior way, aren't you, my love? Fiercely loyal is how I would describe my friend Naomi. Fiercely, fiercely loyal. If you want someone to have your back, that's Naomi. She's got you. If she loves you, she loves you. It's that simple, which is how I feel about my friends. So the warrior stage could go on where you're fighting for, even if you're fighting to get your place in the world and what you want. So you move to the mother archetype and the creatrix one that goes alongside it sometimes. And I was thinking there comes a point where the queen as well is coming after it. But I was mulling about that this morning. And if you become a mother, you're also the warrior. You might lose the lover part, but you get fierce. You know, you think of a fierce lioness or a she-wolf fighting for her children. That's all there. And the creatrix side, whether you're a mother or not, you are creating what you love in the world. You are creating that place of, whether you're creating a career, whether you're creating something artistic, whether you're creating a world you want to live in, whether you're creating a home, creating a life for yourself, creating your role in the world, that all comes in there. And the queen thing, which has slid in afterwards, I think could slide in before, because I think you gain something as you get older in understanding, and I think you gain in your appreciation of the world, or your disillusionment with the world. Wow, that's a bit of a crazy fringe there. But your understanding of it, for definite. But I think, you know, for perhaps people who leave having children till later, they become queen of their world and creatrix of their realm beforehand, and then introduce their children into that. But I think that the slot of it being afterwards is, you know, you find, I know I very definitely in my late 30s, early 40s, I was definitely looking at, you know, like, what am I going to do? You know, the children were getting older, and they were teenagers, and I had more time on my hands where, you know, I was required to pick them up from school or pick them up from work, take them to work, pick them up from parties, pick them up and drop them off at events, not stay with them. I didn't have to do that side of it. Of course, I was always there, I was always mum, but I was able to start looking at what do I want. And I think this is where all these the growth of the feminism, the growth of understanding that, you know, things have changed, come in. And that's where I definitely got creative with how I wanted to live, what I wanted to do. And yeah, I would say I'm queen of my realm. And it's also that I'm not don't want to be a crone yet. I mean, I'm quite happy to welcome some grandchildren when they decide to pop along. Hint, hint, kids. But no, I'm only joking. I'm far too young. But the queen thing of being confident, and actually, I don't know if you can see, my t-shirt actually says queen today. It's from those of you, what's her name? She's oh, I can't think what her name is. She's an Australian lady that's got a clothes label. Oh, I can't think what her name is. Anyway, so yeah, so from there, and from the queen, you know, I have control over what I do, where I go. Obviously, I've got to work. We've all got to work, but I do feel now that I've got the self-assurance that has come with age to do what I want to do. And I suppose that then leads quite easily into the wise woman. And I can remember as a child, my great aunt, Sylve, she was an absolute legend. She was only 38 years older than me. She wasn't a lot older than my dad. It was my dad's aunt. She always seemed to know so much. She always seemed to be a wise woman, a naughty wise woman, a very mischievous wise woman. She's got a wicked sense of humour, and she had this little apron, and we'd go over and she'd make magic lemonade, and I could not work out how this magic lemonade was made. But I did, as I got older, always realise that her apron had pockets. And I don't know if you remember, there used to be little tiny bottles this big of colouring. They've got like a conical pyramid top, and she'd pour lemonade in to your glass, but it would come up blue or green, and we'd be like, wow, what kind of magic is this? And it was these little bottles of food colouring, and so sometimes there were only certain colours you could have, but she had them in her pockets to make sure that we could always have this. And she just seemed awesome, and she was one of my role models, I guess. She was very much a baker and a creator, and she taught me how to make wine, she taught me how to make jam and things like that. So she was very much a wise woman. But she would have been, if I was 10, she would have been sort of 48. She'd have been my age. So I'm like that with all my friends' children, because I've got no nieces or nephews, none, but I've got lots of adopted ones. Hang on, Naomi's saying the role of healer is very nurturing and being creative, and I'm trying to put a cork in my Scorpio sting to be the best I can be to help those in need. Your sting's not that bad. Your sting is not that bad, and Naomi's a very gifted healer, very gifted. And so that's creation as well, isn't it? And that's, Naomi's queen of her realm. She really, really is, because you don't, doing things on your terms. Obviously, there's things we all have to do. We have to pay bills. There are some things that, we can't escape. But yeah, food colouring tastes rank on it. Yeah, it probably does, but it tastes nice in lemonade, Naomi. and then so finally moving on to the crone. Again, that's something that we've come to. What age was the crone these days? I mean, I'm thinking of maybe 70, but I wouldn't want to tell my mum who's 74 that she's a crone, because she'd probably, I'd get an earful. But it's interesting how that's changed, and obviously we're living longer, so that's part of it. And I think what would be interesting would be and what I am going to do actually, and funnily enough, on my phone, I've just got a message from my on Facebook from this particular friend I was thinking with, who's a bloke, is to talk to some men about how they see their roles, and if they reimagine them. You still have a hex band. Yes, you've definitely got a hex band. And how the men reimagine their roles, if they have, how they maybe have added something, a more caring side to their roles, to something not more feminine, but maybe unlocking the feminine side to their roles. And I know I'll talk to my friend tonight. We've got a pagan moot tonight, yeah, that's something I thought about, because obviously I don't know much about that, and it did occur to me that I need to look into that as well. So that's something I'm going to look at some point this week, with a view to maybe talking about in the future, because men, a lot of men I know believe in the goddess, and think about goddess and acknowledge goddess. So yeah, I'll have to have a look at that for the sake of fairness. But yeah, so that's where I am. And so thank you for joining me. Thank you for your lovely comments, Naomi. I'm going to go, because I'm going to go and see my husband, because it's the first anniversary of losing his dad today. So yeah, it was his first birthday without him. It was my father-in-law's birthday, the first one without him, last week, and this week it's the anniversary of his death. So I'm going to go and see my husband, who is probably needing a big fat hug. But during the week next week, I'm going to be looking at crystals, and I'm hoping to get a lovely friend who's super duper with crystals, to come and talk to us next Sunday. So I'll keep you updated. Thanks for joining me. Have a lovely, lovely week, and take care. Bye.